Tulis.
Sometimes the Reverend Frank Pomeroy, when the air conditioner was lagging, would take off his jacket and deliver his sermon at the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, Texas. Well, yesterday, a man with more than just a jacket on and who was very warm under his garb, even though the AC was working yesterday, he came in very heavily protected and very unseen behind a mask and a hood and an armor plate on his body, killing 26 people and injuring scores of others. His name is Devon Patrick Kelley, and he effectively replaced Reverend Frank Pomeroy, who was not in town with his wife, both out of town. There was a substitute man, a supply pastor, there that morning, and the gunman, Devon Patrick Kelley, had his own message to deliver. And that message was successfully transferred to his listeners, his audience, and of course the gasping, waiting world, even here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where people like you and I are listening breathlessly to the CBS newscast at the top of every hour to find out what the latest is in the way of revelations about Devon Patrick Kelley, atheist and gunman. Well, the message is very clear. There is a clear message from atheism to the world around. A message, let's just call it one of courage, one of true identity, one of sincerity and authenticity, one which the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, who devised the theory after World War II of existentialism, one of which he would have been very proud, one which the deconstructionists down at UTC would hail as a mighty step toward individual identity, even though bad things happened. It was nonetheless an authentic expression of this man's individual and private religion writ large across the headlines on CNN and around the world in a little town on the Lord's Day morning, Sunday morning, in the middle of a worship service in which a handful of God's people, ordinarily about 50 people, attend, membership at 75, according to press reports. They're worshiping God, singing psalms and songs and hymns and melodies, and going through a rite of worship, which is called a service. Now, a service is something that God wants from his people, and when they gather together, that is what it's called. It is a service of submission to him, where the main mission is for him to talk to the listeners, for him to talk to the assembled men, women, the senior citizens, one person in the 70s mown down, and children as young as 4, according to reports, dead also. What is the message of Devon Patrick Kelley to the people of that town? What is the message of Devon Patrick Kelley to Chattanooga and to Hamilton County, to people like you, my listener, who has perhaps once attended church but doesn't consider attending now, who has lost interest in the things of religion, as you call it. Religion, that's for religious people. That's for people who have problems, right? I'm strong and I'm fit and I don't have problems. Religion, which Marx once said is a kind of opioid for the masses, a thing, an idea, a fantasy that keeps them supple and weak, keeps them dependent and attentive, and of course submissive. Much of modern Christianity is all about a misrepresentation of Romans 13, keeping the Christian person submissive. What is the message? What is the sermon? What are the sermon headings of the message of Devon Patrick Kelley, atheist? Well, there are quite a few, and I'm going to go through them quickly. Just bear with me. This is David Tulis, and I do thank you for giving us just a couple minutes here at 92.7 FM, 95.3 HD4, high definition 4. We argue about local economy and free market, and we can see in this sermon numerous instances where with things that we hold dear, local economy and free market, loving our neighbors as ourselves, are held in low regard, held in discount. Reverend Pomeroy has a completely opposite message, and I think we need to hear, in contrast to the Christian gospel, what the alternative is in its brightest and clearest and most refined and well-articulated fashion, and that's what I'm hoping to be able to give you in the next 5 minutes. So do stay tuned. Well, the main point I think that Devon Patrick Kelley argues is that there's no law above him, and that is possible to believe, and he genuinely believed it. There is no law above him because, as Martin Heidegger and other philosophers, Soren Kierkegaard, and the man I mentioned a moment ago, the Frenchman Jean-Paul Sartre, whose work influenced Albert Camus and his very famous novel The Stranger, which every high school student reads either as a senior or every college student reads in freshman lit. The Stranger, beautiful lyrical novel of a man with a kind of aimless and pointless existence who kills a stranger on a beach. And at that moment, we are supposed to understand he is at his acme, right, at his highest point. And that is because man is at the center. In the modern ethos, in the modern ethic, man is at the center of all. And there is no God. There is no God to put him in context with other people. There is no God to say, no, you have to love me first, and then you have to love your neighbors as yourself. There's no God to say that. And so what we have instead is that there is no one who loves me more than I do. And as I come to the very top of my being, the very highest point of my existence, which of course was yesterday morning when he drove up to the church, that was the highest point of his experience. He went in. There was nothing to stop him. There was nothing to make him go on. He was totally neutral. And yet, because his authentic self was acting, he rhythmically and senselessly and pointlessly, without any motivation and without hatred, rushed in, killing people as he went pulling the trigger of his AR-15 style Ruger .223 caliber semi-automatic rifle. Devon Patrick Kelley, atheist, believes in the autonomous self. There is no autonomous. Simply means self-law. Nomos is law. Auto is self. Automobile is, of course, you are mobile by yourself, right? You don't have to have a horse pulling you. You are self-propelled. You are self-propelled. You are autonomous if you are self-governed, and there is no law outside of yourself. The Christian argument offered by Frank Pomeroy, the Reverend Frank Pomeroy, who survived because he was out of town with his wife, is just the opposite. We are all bound by God. We are bound to worship him and to obey his commands. That is what the Christian theory is all about. We are not self-governing. We are not autonomous. We have a theonomy. We have a law from God instead. And on the point of autonomy, think about Devon Patrick Kelley. The moment he reached for that highest point, when he reached for his highest and best self, which was when he darted from his car, hearing the door slam behind him as he jogged forward, heavily laden, that was his highest moment. And I think of the example in the literature of the existentialist. You're standing on a cliff. You don't want to fall over. You're terrified of falling over, but at the same time, you have this brash instinct to throw yourself off. The moment you decide, that is the moment of your truest self. And that's the moment of Patrick Devon Kelley grabbing his rifle and his bag and slamming the door behind him, getting out and jogging toward the front door of that little church in that tiny town in Texas with 700 people. That's all the people there were. And apparently, according to reports, he had some connection with them. And it's also important to understand this, that Patrick Kelley, the atheist, thought that these people owed him their lives. He was there to collect. He was there to obtain the payment of the debt. They owed him something. They owed him their lives, every one of them. And if he could collect from every last person in there by their death, he would be satisfied. At that moment, when the propitiation of his necessity is fulfilled, he is gratified, well, he would either sat down for a drink of water or shot himself with a 9mm in the pistol that apparently he did not use. He would have done either of the two things. Both of them are equally important, both of them equally vital to him. I take their lives. You can hear him say, I take their lives with the same indifference that I opened the door at the Valero gas station nearby on US 87, the door of the refrigerator, and pulled out a plastic bag encased ham and cheese sandwich. I could have taken the bacon, lettuce, and tomato, fresh wrapped in the refrigerator, but no, I took the BLT. So the same indifference, the same carelessness. He picked one, his hand reached for one over the other there before he went over to the church about a block away. That it's the same indifference that he killed these people, that he did that he picked out a sandwich. And in the whole episode, the whole rank evangelistic moment that he had in that church was asking himself, can I stop? Is it done? Or does it matter? That is the question. It doesn't matter. There is no law above me. I am above all these things. Devon Patrick Kelley believed in a message opposite that of Frank Pomeroy. Frank Pomeroy teaches from his pulpit that God is personal. And Devon Patrick Kelley believed just the opposite. He had the opposite argument. God, the Reverend would say, is totally personal. He is intimate with every creature. He is proximate. He is near. He has revealed himself in a book. Though it has been translated, there is a canon in that book, and that book has survived from the beginning of the time of Moses. God is near. God is reachable, and we can obtain access to God by prayer and by repentance. First by repentance for violating his laws, and then by prayer, and then by communing with him, either reading by acts of charity, by acts of sanctification, as Christians call their good works, or by hearing faithful preaching from the pulpit. That's what Frank Pomeroy promised to do. That's what he dedicated his life to doing at First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, Texas. But the killer, the man who was there on a mission, who was there devout to his religion, in his idea, there is only cosmic impersonalism. There is no personality anywhere in anything. Nothing is personal. The sunset is not personal. The food is not personal. The crops that you can see growing across the fields out that way, they're not personal. Nothing is personal. Even human beings are not personal. Other human beings are unreachable. God, of course, is reachable without ritual, without self-flagellation, without self-abuse, without castration, self-castration, as many human religions teach. All human religions are about things that you have to do to attain access to God. The things you have to do to submit yourself, to go through the religious hierarchy, the ministerial industrial complex of your time, of your empire, your country. You go through that, and then you have access to God. Well, that shares somewhat with what Devon Patrick Kelley, atheist and gunman. Devon's not confused. To think that he can love and hate in the same act is not confusing. Okay, it's like the rapist. The rapist can love and hate at the same time. The abuser of himself in sex is doing exactly that. That's why people who are debauched and who take part in orgies hate themselves when they're done. They hate themselves. They hate the woman before them. It's all the same. Love and hate in the same act. Now, Devon Patrick Kelley doesn't have to be systematic. He doesn't have to be consistent in his postmodern ethic. He has or had a postmodern ethic, one that has become very popular thanks to the universities, thanks to media, thanks to the very nature of TV watching, where you have a jumble of contradictory, high and low, grand and small, laughable and ridiculous with the sublime, all within the same 5-minute span, where things are all disjointed and taken apart. Kelley loves and hates in the same act. He is self-contradictory. He is non-systematic, but it's not a problem. His success is being able to live with these self-contradictory sensations, these self-annihilating views and perspectives that don't make any sense if you look at them objectively or in terms of a genuine, true, or even a godly moral ethic. Let's deconstruct the individual. Now, that is what he did. He was involved in an act of deconstruction. Deconstruction is an academic discipline that when I was a student at UTK, came into by my own invention, as I found out. And then I read the writers that are noted for this line of thinking: Jacques Derrida, the Frenchman, Paul de Man, who was a French philosopher prone to Nazism, and Heidegger, the German, also prone to. He was also a supporter of Nazism. So these theories are they're all prone to authoritarian statism and progressivism, and they come along with the works of Roland Barthes and Michel Foucault. They come out of academia. They come out of philosophy. Christianity, of course, has nothing to do with philosophy. Christianity does not concern itself with who am I and why am I here. That's not that. How do I exist? Those are not the questions of Christianity. Christianity is not mystical. It is not self-absorptive. And rather, Christianity is other-centric. It makes people think about God first and their neighbor second. It is not self-absorbed, self-reflective, and omphalos-centric. Omphalos-centric simply means looking at your belly button. The omphalos is your belly button. It's not looking down at your belly button. It's not gazing at your navel and figuring out why you're here. What am I to do? How am I to exist? What is my reason? What is my purpose? These are not things that Christianity encourages at all, but that is one of the primary tasks of philosophy. And that is the kind of thinking that Devon Patrick Kelley was all about. There is no meaning in the universe. According to Devon Patrick Kelley's sermon notes, there is no meaning. All meaning is private. And because all meaning is private, it's impossible to connect with another person. Even if you make love to your wife, you can't connect with another person. You can't connect with her. That's why he had a broken marriage. All of his efforts at intimacy were thwarted by his own ideas, his own lust, his own self-absorption. All meaning is private, and because all meaning is private, there are solid walls among all individuals. They're so high that you cannot cross over and connect. You cannot connect with anybody. You are totally alone in the universe, and therefore the universe has no meaning. Christianity has an opposite argument. Christianity says we are to be about other people. Because it is other-centric rather than self-centric, it is about looking out for the other, and that's what Frank Pomeroy did, and that's what he taught in the Baptist Church. Devon Patrick Kelley was involved in the massacre of 26 in Sutherland Springs, Texas. He was involved in a post-human exercise of power. If you can't connect voluntarily, if you can't connect peaceably with other people, the only way to do it is through power. And that, of course, is one of the ideals of postmodernism and even deconstruction. There is a resorting to power politics, and compulsion. All modern security states have based themselves on the postmodern ethic. And that is because there's chaos, we have to have force to unite people, to keep the peace, and to keep people together. We find union in force rather than by voluntary means, through family, through private relationships, through the church, through worship of God, who is our creator. We can't have that. We don't have that. And really, we are skeptical that any of those things are good or right. We need to be very careful about them, according to those who are involved in this post-human exercise of power, of which Devon Patrick Kelley was a private devotee. He was a private devotee of that concept, the post-human concept. Of course, he was at the very edge. He was at the cliff. And the question was, am I going to throw myself off, or am I going to preserve myself? And he threw himself off. And on his way down, he pulled the trigger and reloaded as many times as he could. This theory, it is modern academic theory. We find it in all the universities. I'm very confident in Christian colleges, even in the Reformed colleges and universities of the world. You would think the best ones, the ones with the truest perspective, the truest biblical analysis of the world, even there you find this sort of thinking. Devon Patrick Kelley's attack was on the idea of personality and individuality. There can't be other people. That's why he could mow down a 4-year-old, firing repeatedly at an old woman, shooting at an overweight man whose guts poured out from the bullet holes in his stomach, just like Eglon, when the knife went into his stomach, his guts rushed out on the floor as his Israelite assassin escaped. In the same way, this man, Devon Patrick Kelley, killed without individuality. He killed apart from personality. He made an attack in the firing away of his .223 caliber rifle yesterday. He made an attack on meaning. He made an attack, a violent attack on cause and effect. Because in the world, if you live in a world where it's only you and there aren't other people, and you cannot have relationships with other people, and you're oppressed and you're lonely and you're broken, and yet you have hope in yourself somehow, in some vain way. You just have to see what's going to happen. you are denying cause and effect. There is no sanction. There is no consequence for sin. There is no consequence for virtue. For him, it was indifferent whether he killed or said, "May I help you, sir? Do you need some money?" Either of those acts, from Devon Patrick Kelley perspective, would have been the same one. It would have been the same to shoot the man between the eyeballs with a pistol or a .223 caliber rifle, or to say, "May I help you up, ma'am?" Both the same. In his mind, the virtue and the righteous action and the act of generosity are the same as shooting that old woman in the side of her head, right through the ear. Right through the ear. There went the bullet. And it's all the same to him. It's all the same. Everything is of indifference. Nothing matters. Everything is indifferent. You have what philosophers call a decentering, and I'm thinking of the work of Petitim Sorokin and his book it's called Crisis of Our Life, published in 1941. I've got the 1941 edition that has been reprinted without change since that time. Yeah, Dutton, 1941. All the same. That there is a decentering of the individual, and the individual is unsettled. He has no stable beliefs, and it's all the same to him whether there's mercy or blood and death. It's all the same to him, and somehow, because he still is made in God's image, he cries out to find his way out of the trap, and that's what he was doing. His massacre of these innocent people was a cry for help. It was a cry that I don't need help, because to him, in the end, giving help by means of death and getting help by means of prayer, supplication, and fasting on his behalf, tears shed on his behalf, they're all the same. They're all the same to him. And so 26 people are dead. The same thinking that in his mind is one that says in our country that a baby is as valuable as an eagle egg. In fact, an eagle egg in our country is more valuable. If you destroy an eagle egg, you can spend 2 years in the federal penitentiary. If you kill a baby, well, you're told by Hetty Weinberg, the American Civil Liberties Union in Nashville, that you are exercising a constitutional right. You can kill that baby. That's okay. You are expressing yourself, and it doesn't matter how many dead people there are. If you can express yourself by that constitutionally protected means of self-determination, you determine yourself. You are your own law. There is no human life inside you. That is just a mass of tissue. Devon Patrick Kelley, in his sermon notes, goes on. The death of young men at war is tragic, but so is the loss of mountains and wilderness. And there he's quoting David Brown, formerly of the Sierra Club. The death of young men in war is tragic, and the loss of mountains and wilderness are the same. And that is the kind of thinking that permeates our culture today, the postmodern American culture, where the work of the church has been stopped. It has effectively been stopped by the privatization of Christianity, and you might say the deconstruction of Christianity. When I was a graduate student, I came into this thinking kind of all by myself, and I have to thank a very wonderful book by C.S. Lewis called, I think it's called A Literary Critique, that talks about the act of reading and how books can be measured by how they're read as well as by how they're written. It's, for me, a kind of introductory methodology of reaching into the world of deconstruction, and that's what we had at Sutherland Springs, Texas Church, a deconstructive act. A courageous man who finds himself in his own suicide. In the end, he was willing to die for his beliefs. David Tulis, Nooga Radio, 92.7 FM.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio,